Okay, I want to talk a little bit about how the square-to-square swing relates to the lowest point of the arc and the types of shots we can expect to see based on the moves we're making in the square-to-square swing. So, first and foremost, if you haven't seen the other videos and you don't have the ebook, it might be a good idea to check that out. Check those out before you try to make sense of all this video, because I'm going to skip a few things just to get into ball flight. But basically, when we're working with the square-to-square swing, we're trying to preset impact at address. So we're setting up with a slight bit of forward shaft lean, a grip that will allow for the club face to work back square rather than turning open, and our weight kind of just setting up in a position that allows for a little bit closer to impact. So if I were setting up on my back foot, that would create kind of an upward angle of attack. If I set up a little bit more with my weight even in the middle or even just a little bit toward my front foot, I'm going to create, or I'm going to kind of preset a possibly more downward strike. Now, how the square-to-square swing makes things simpler is, one reason it makes things simpler is because the club face isn't shifting and traveling off the plane of the arc too much. We're trying to keep it as square as possible and just use our shoulders and the rotation of our body to move the club head. How that's going to relate to ball flight is when I keep this all locked in one piece and I rotate my body, essentially I'm turning my golf swing into like a giant Ferris wheel or a giant circle with a center hub. Now it's not exactly like that. I'm not a machine, I'm not a robot, but I am eliminating some moving parts. I'm eliminating this upward wrist hinge with my hands. I'm eliminating a big roll open of the club face and a roll close of the club face. So I am simplifying it to the point where it is almost a little bit like a machine. So if we can imagine that my swing is a bit like a big Ferris wheel, and if we look down the line, obviously my swing's not going to be straight up in the air and straight back down. It's almost impossible, I think, probably to get the club to swing straight on the target line down and then swing straight on the target line going through. So because I'm standing beside the ball, my swing's got a little bit of a side angle to it, a little bit more like tennis or baseball, because I'm just playing from beside the ball. So when I look at my swing, if it were this perfect circle, and we're trying to get it as close as possible with a square-to-square swing, if it's a perfect circle, as the club travels down the arc, or down the plane of that giant Ferris wheel, you can imagine that the club at this point right now would be pointed to the right of the target. So even though I've got my whole system, my stance and everything, my alignment, my body all square to the target or parallel to the target line, as my club swings, as it's coming down that path, it's actually pointed to the right. So what that means is, any shot that I'm going to hit where I need to hit the ball off the ground, where I'd prefer to have a slightly descending blow, any one of those shots with a square setup and a square-to-square swing should start slightly right of target. So what I'm hoping to do in my setup is figure out a preset position where my handle feels good, my grip feels good, and I can allow for a downward angle of attack or a downward strike, which is going to start the ball out to the right, but a club face that's a little bit closed to that path. So let's say that I strike the ball on my downswing. Let's say my club is traveling out 5 degrees. So my club is traveling to the right of the target 5 degrees. I'm going to need my club face to be a little close to that path. So my club face actually will probably still need to be pointed to the right so that my ball can go ahead and start out there, but maybe like 3 degrees to the right. So if my path were 5 degrees to the right and my club face is 3 degrees to the right, then I'm going to get a ball that has some spin that's going to bring it back to the middle. So that's how an iron shot works, or a shot where the ball is played on the ground. When I get into my driver, again, I still want to maintain all of these presets, but I'm not hitting the ball off the ground anymore. So the ball is actually going to be up in my stance a little bit to accommodate the fact that it's teed up in the air. And again, if my big circle is coming down, it's going to reach a low point, then it's going to start going back up again. I'll want to play the ball in a place that allows for that club to go up and strike it cleanly. But also, now that I've moved it up in my stance, I've moved my contact point for the ball to the front part of my arc, or past center. Now my club is going back up into the left. So my path is actually slightly left of the target. So if my path is left of the target, I don't want a ball to curve any more to the left. So I actually need my face to counteract that left path. So with my driver, or anytime I tee it up, I'm going to go ahead and allow for the fact that my club is traveling slightly up through impact. But because it's traveling up and it's on this left side of the arc, or the forward side of the arc, it's traveling to the left, I'm going to want my club face to point maybe 2 degrees to the left, and my path to point, whatever that might be, 3 or 4 degrees to the left when it strikes the actual golf ball. So that's how the lowest point of the arc relates to the square-to-square swing, and that's how it relates to ball flight. When we're maintaining all of these angles, we're trying to just kind of create a really simple machine that will just kind of turn back and turn through. And depending on where the ball is in that arc or in that swing, we're going to get 2 different shot shapes, or actually probably a multitude of them, depending on how much downward we strike the ball. With maybe a short, low spinning wedge, we might have a tendency to hit quite a bit of a draw, and in a long, it's not going to drop crazy because it's a wedge, it's tilted quite a bit up. But in my longer club, my driver, because I'm going up now and catching the ball on the upward side of my arc, I'm going to actually have a tendency, or it's going to be simpler to hit a fade. So in my own game, when I'm hitting like a 3/4 lob wedge or sand wedge, I expect to see a little bit lower shot because I've got the handle leading and I'm hitting on the down part of my swing. And I expect the ball to start a little right and draw back to my target. Now it's going to have a lot of spin because I'm hitting it cleanly, because I'm not hitting any grass or dirt or anything before I hit the ball, because of my forward shaft lean and my downward angle of attack. But when I get into my mid-irons, I'm not hitting so much down, I'm kind of hitting level through it. So the ball position is going to be right near my low point of my arc. So I'm going to hit a relatively straight shot, maybe a tiny draw with my mid-irons. And then as the ball's up on a tee and I'm hitting it on the upward side of my arc, my natural shot shape is going to be a little bit of a fade. So that's how you're going to use the square-to-square swing to work with the ball flights that naturally just kind of come up when you're using the swing.